All right, Dalton, breaking down another top 10 position unit in college football. It is the top 10 offensive lines in college football heading into the 2024 season. I'm not trying to sound biased here or trying to pump us up or toot our own horn or anything, Dalton, but I feel like there's no better company in the world to be doing this list than PFF, man, with all the metrics that we have for offensive line, all the grades we have for offensive line. So this is the definitive, perfect list of the top 10 offensive lines that we've got in college football right now. Of course, this is my list that Dalton will, of course, tear to shreds after I go over it. You can find this list over at pff.com, where I ranked every position unit in college football right now. But at number 10 for the top 10 offensive lines in the country is the Florida Gators. Florida's offensive line was dominant in the run game last year. They had an 82.2 run blocking grade, which was fourth in the Power 5. They returned 3 starters from that offensive line, including Jake Slaughter, who is a star, a breakout star for them at center this upcoming season. He actually was kind of the backup for them behind Kingsley Aguakun, but he got hurt. Slaughter came in and was fantastic, man. He had 81.2 overall grade, which was second among Power 5 centers last year. He's my number 8 returning interior offensive lineman in college football. So Florida at number 10, staying in the Sunshine State at number 9 with Florida State, one of the deepest offensive lines that we have in college football. They bring back 5 of the 8 offensive linemen who played at least 190 snaps for them last year, including 3 starters in Darius Washington at left tackle, Maurice Smith at center, and right tackle Jeremiah Byers. Washington led all ACC tackles last year with a 76.1 grade and 84.6 pass blocking grade. I think he's their best offensive player right now, honestly. And I also brought in a couple transfers from the transfer portal, and Richie Leonard from Florida, who I just mentioned before, pretty good guard at Florida, and Terrence Ferguson from Alabama. They're both expected to start at guard for the Seminoles this upcoming season. So at number 9 is Florida. Once again, staying in the Sunshine State at number 8 with Miami. The Hurricanes coming in at number 8. They could be a lot higher, Dalton, on this list by the time the season is over, because 2 of their starters in right tackle Francis Mauigoa and left guard Samson Akunlala, I hope I pronounced that right, and I will get it right by the end of the year, trust me. They are true sophomores, both of them 5-star recruits in the 2023 class. So very, very high ceiling. Mauigoa had a really good freshman year as their right tackle, starting right tackle, as a true freshman. He ranked 3rd among ACC tackles that year with a 70.7 grade. And right behind him in 4th was his teammate Jalen Rivers at left tackle, who will be entering his 3rd year as a starter for the Hurricanes. And Zach Carpenter transferred in from Indiana at center. He led all Big Ten centers this past season with a 1.9% pressure rate allowed. So number 8 is Miami. Number 7 is Missouri. Missouri had the 2nd highest graded offensive line in the Power 5 last year, earning an 83.1 grade. 3 of their 5 starters returned to that offensive line, and none were better than their center, Connor Tollison. He had a 50.8 grade in 2022. He improved that to a 78.7 grade this past season. Had an 80.4 run blocking grade as well, which was 3rd best in the Power 5. They have incoming transfers too in Marcus Bryant from SMU, who since 2021 he's an 84.8 pass blocking grade, which is 7th among Group of 5 tackles. And then Caden Green at left guard, started at left guard for Oklahoma as a true freshman, former top 100 recruit, and was a freshman All-American for PFF this past year. So Missouri at number 7, and at number 6 is Ohio State. Returns 4 starters from their offensive line last year, and their star player, in my opinion, is left guard Donovan Jackson, who's our number 4 interior offensive lineman in college football, 3rd most valuable returning Power 5 guard according to our wins above average metric. Also brought back both their starting tackles in Josh Simmons and Josh Fryer, who each earned 70-plus grades last year, and they brought in a transfer at center in Seth McLaughlin from Alabama. Had a down year with a 63.4 grade this past season, but the year before, he was 2nd among SEC centers with a 75.1 PFF grade. So at number 10, Florida, 9, Florida State, 8, Miami, 7, Missouri, and 6, Ohio State. Dawn, from those first 5, what stands out to you?
Stands out. You probably need some air after all that explaining. Yeah. But no, I mean, the 2 honestly that stick out to me are I would say Miami and Florida State. Florida State, their offensive line is interesting because it's probably the only unit on their entire team that didn't get completely torn to shreds.
Yeah.
And we've seen DJ Uiagalelei. He's accustomed to having a good offensive line between his Clemson days and an elite unit they had at Oregon State last year. So that's really going to help him a lot in that transition. And I think especially in Florida State's run game, where they run not the simplest run game in the world. There's like a lot of counter, a lot of pulling, a lot of different concepts that Mike Norvell has in their offense. So I think experience on the offensive line is big for Florida State if they're going to keep contending in the ACC. And then, look, it feels like every time we do these position rooms, we have to bring up the Miami Hurricanes. And they're just loaded with talent. And that includes here. I mean, you've got Francis Mauigoa, who everybody saw the clip of him mauling that Louisville defender. Yeah. I forget who it was. When they played Louisville. Zach Carpenter's really interesting because he's a good player, but he's replacing a really, really good player in Matt Lee, who was one of the best pass protectors at center that we've had on record at PFF. Jalen Rivers is obviously really good too. Miami, it's another thing, right? It's another thing that makes them really, really interesting. When you talk about, it's possible that Miami's the most talented team in the ACC. It's not just flashy spots. It's not just Cam Ward. It's the offensive line. We've talked about their defensive line a lot lately. I think those two in the ACC and Miami especially stick out as like you start to piece this together room by room, and you feel like you're like, wow, Miami's got like all of the pieces to do this. If they're finally, I believe somebody told me the other day they've never won the ACC. Is that right?
Probably, right? Because there used to be a Big East school when they're back in their heyday. They were a Big East school, like the early 2000s. So
it's like what? It's like almost 20 years though. Now they've never won the ACC, and it makes you think with all of this talent. We've talked about Xavier Restrepo and the receivers, and Cam Ward and the running backs, and their defensive Ruben Payne and their D line. Now their offensive line is top 10. It makes you feel like the hype might be warranted, that they're just so darn talented at every spot.
Dalton, I honestly, when they got Cam Ward and everyone was saying, man, Miami's going to be really good this year, I was the one pumping the brakes and be like, okay, let's calm down a little bit. And when I was making these rankings, man, they kept popping up. I was like, oh, my God, Miami might be my pick to win the ACC. And right now, I'm not going to – I will spoil it. I am picking Miami to win the ACC. I don't know if you've decided on that yet, on who you're picking to win the conference, but I don't think you can deny they're the most talented team in the conference right now.
I haven't looked into it yet, and they got a couple of big early games that are going to tell us a lot. Especially Week 1 at Florida is going to be massive for both of those teams. I haven't decided yet, but they're certainly on the list.
Yeah, dude, I think they're the most talented team in that conference right now. So, yeah, they're really good. All right, are you? Anything else you want to bring up? Or are you good to go 5-1 now?
Go for it. No, those are the two that stuck out to me. The ACC is going to be a wild ride.
All right, at number 5, and the only non-SEC school in the top 5 here is Oregon. Really just are so strong at offensive tackle. They bring back a Johnny Cornelius, who's my number 4 returning tackle in the nation. Only surrendered pressure on 2% of his pass blocking snaps last year, which is the lowest rate of any returning Power 5 tackle. Josh Connerly Jr. at left tackle was my honorable mention for my top 10 offensive tackles list. So in my opinion, they had the second best tackle duo in college football right now in Oregon. They also brought back their starting left guard in Marcus Harper and added another guard from the portal in Matthew Bedford from Indiana, who had a 70.7 run blocking grade last year, which is 5th among all Big Ten guards. Now, they lost Jackson Powers Johnson, the best center in the country. But I will say, the kid that they have replacing him, and Iapani Lalulu, I hope I got that right again, he showed high-end ability, man, as a true freshman. He had a 0.9% pressure rate allowed, which was the lowest among all Power 5 guards last year. So he wasn't a starter for Oregon. But when he was out there at guard, he did not allow anything as a pass blocker, man. So I'm excited to see what he can do as the starting center for the Ducks this year. So they're checking at number 5. At number 4 is Texas, who returns 4 starters on their offensive line. And the headliner, of course, is Kelvin Banks Jr., our number 2 tackle in college football and probably a top 10 pick overall in next year's NFL draft. They also bring back the entirety of their interior offensive line in Hayden Connor, Jake Majors, and DJ Campbell. And I'm a huge fan of DJ Campbell, man. I think he could be a really breakout player this year. Cameron Williams will be the new right tackle for them. He did not allow a single pressure on 49 pass blocking snaps as a sophomore. So Texas, led by Kelvin Banks Jr., is at number 4. But Kelvin Banks Jr. is not the best offensive tackle in the country, Dawn. He's number 2 because at number 1 is Will Campbell, who checks in at LSU. And they're my number 3 offensive line in the country, mainly because of that tackle duo of Will Campbell, who I who I mentioned before is the best tackle in the country. Emory Jones, number 9 in my tackle rankings. And there's a legitimate chance both those guys could be first-round picks in the NFL draft in 2025. I think it's a really good chance that happens. Also, LSU brings back both their starting guards in Miles Frazier and Garrett Dellinger, who were 3rd and 4th among the SEC guards in pass blocking grade. And then redshirt freshman DJ Chester will be the new starting center for the Tigers. He was one of the 10 best interior offensive line recruits in the class of 2023 as well. So LSU at number 3. At number 2 is Georgia, who had both their guards make my top 10 interior offensive line list in Tate Ratledge and Dylan Fairchild. They're both among the best pass blockers we have in the interior offensive line right now. They also bring back both their starting tackles in Ernest Green and Xavier Truss, who each earned 60-plus grades this past season. They have a new starter at center in Jared Wilson, because Cedric Van Pran is now with the Buffalo Bills. But Wilson looked pretty good as a backup. He had a 70.2 grade on 131 snaps last year. So mainly due to the guard duo and some good tackles they have at Georgia, they check in at number 2. But at number 1 is Alabama, because they have, Dalton, one of the best interior offensive lines I think I've seen in a long time, man. All 3 of their starters on the interior offensive line made my top 7 interior offensive linemen in college football. Parker Brailsford, number 1, the best center in the country, in my opinion. Tyler Booker, number 3. Jaden Roberts, number 7. So their interior offensive line is ridiculous. And that alone, no matter what they had to tackle, is good enough for me to have them at number 1. But they got a big returner in Caden Proctor, who actually transferred to Iowa this offseason, then back to Alabama now. He was a former top 10 recruit in the country, was a true freshman last year, started at left tackle for Alabama as a true freshman. Really had a roller coaster year. 54.5 grade in the first 7 games, 76.3 grade in the last 7 games. So he got a lot better as the year went on. I think he'll be a breakout player as a sophomore. And then the right tackle spot will be Elijah Pritchett, who was a former top 35 recruit in the class of 2022. So based off the interior offensive line and based off the Caden Proctor coming back to school, Alabama, for me, had pretty easily the number 1 offensive line in the country. So what stands out to you, Dalton, in the 5-1 range?
I think you mentioned it at the top, and the SEC, man, having the top 4, it's just nuts. And they're all legitimate prospects, right? You're talking about the 2 best tackles in the country sitting at LSU and Texas. Georgia, I'll tell you what, I know Bama's in part because of Brailsford, but Georgia's pair of guards stacks right up with them, man. With Ratledge and Fairchild, they're both really, really good there. And then Bama, I think that is the tiebreaker between them and Georgia, is getting to keep Caden Proctor, having him come back after the threat of leaving, or actually leaving and then coming back. That's a big difference. And you talk about a true freshman, a lot of times it's going to be a roller coaster, but to play his best ball down the stretch when Bama really needed to win every game right after losing to Texas and really trying to work their way back into the playoff picture is big time. And Bama's offensive line last year was, over the last couple of years, been highly criticized, right? But I think Proctor coming back and Brailsford coming in there, and his NFL prospects are going to be weird because he is smaller, and we'll see how he plays in the SEC with his size. But I think having him is a big asset for Jalen Milroe and Kalen DeBoer putting in that offense, right? Like, everybody talks about, well, Milroe's going to be a great fit for DeBoer's offense, but there's a lot more that goes into it than that, right? And you talk about having an experienced center, the best center in the country, a guy who just did this national title run with Washington with DeBoer. Brailsford is an impact player that they got inside, and to have those 2 big guys next to him is almost unfair, and then Proctor and Pritchett too. But no, the SEC, I think it's something, maybe the Big Ten tries to put up an argument, because then your next 2, you've got Oregon and Ohio State, and then Missouri, right? But trench play in the SEC is king, man. I mean, look, all these teams we've talked about, even O-line or D-line, right? A lot of these teams struggle because they're just not good enough in the trenches, right? I think about an Ole Miss, right? Sometimes in the trenches is just where they lag behind these other teams, and that's still going to be a theme as we move in. Or, I look at LSU and I go, they're going to stand a chance. Garrett Nussmeier will stand a chance because of these 2 tackles. Absolutely. But no, that for me, I think it's actually, this might be the best list you've done. I might not have a whole lot of criticism for it. But no, the SEC, you've got 6 of the top 10 here in the SEC, and I think it's every bit reasonable.
Yes. Is there nothing you would change then? Nothing that stands out, like maybe a team that you put up lower, higher, even a team that you would add into the mix, you think? Or
man, this is solid because these top 5 have so much talent. No, this is about. I got to be honest. This is about as good as you've done with one of these.
Perfect list. All right, let's go.
It's pretty darn good. I think there's some people. There's some people that really like Connerly and Cornelius that would move them up. That would move Oregon up, but I get it too. I mean, Kelvin Banks is a monster, and we saw what Texas offensive line can do in the run game, especially last year. I don't have a whole lot of issue with this. I mean, you've got star power, and I think you've got the two teams, especially at the top, that you could argue have the best front. All five of them, right?
Yeah.
Like you said, LSU has a question mark at center. Texas, is Banks, and then there's a little bit of a drop off from there. You mentioned too with Laulolu at center for Oregon. Well, part-time role last year at guard. That's what Jackson Powers Johnson did the year before too. Yep. He was an outstanding right guard even in a part-time role, and then last year moved to center. He was best center in the country. So I'm not saying obviously they're going to have the best center in the country again, but that's the same blueprint that they had with Powers Johnson. So they must just have it where, on the offensive line, if you've got experience and you generally understand the scheme, you can play any position.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm excited about him, man. I think he's going to be a breakout player for Oregon, and I think they have a really good offensive line with those two tackles they have there as well. But, yeah, man, not surprising me because my lists are always perfect, but it's nice to see you echo that statement, though, Dalton. So
you get one. Everybody gets one.
So perfect top 10 list. So obviously none of you should have any issues with this list, but let us know in the comments below if you somehow do have an issue with this top 10 offensive line list. And of course, like the video, subscribe to the channel. We've got plenty more of these lists coming and plenty more coming as well as we continue to preview the 2024 college football season.